like the Avengers assembling here. We got Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report, Greg Auman from FOX Sports. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. I mean, the last 24 hours, Scott, we'll start with you. The last 24 hours, not really anything going on with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's good to be with you, Jay and Greg. Yeah, this has been a crazy turn of events. I haven't seen anything like this in my 30 years covering the team. You know, it's unfortunate the way it happened. You can't fault Liam Coen for wanting to take one of 32 opportunities, right, to be a head coach. There's only 32 in the league. And I think what would have made the situation better, because if you look at how Dave Canales handled his departure, right, from Tampa to Carolina, Todd Bowles, Jason Light, they still have strong affection for Dave Canales. This is a different situation, though, because he gave the Glazers, Jason Light, Todd Bowles, Baker Mayfield, the offensive coaching staff, his word that he would stay in Tampa Bay and not take that second interview. And after Shad Khan had fired Trent Baalke and reached out to Liam Coen, I think of Liam Coen at that point in time, or at the point where he agreed to go to Jacksonville and have that face-to-face meeting with Shad Khan. If he would have called Todd Bowles or Jason Light or somebody in the front office at that point in time and said, listen, I've given this some more thought. Shad Khan's reached back out to me. I want to be above board and let you know kind of where my head's at. And I think that would have been a very disappointing situation for the Buccaneers, for Todd Bowles especially. He's got to find his fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years. But the way that it transpired, doing it kind of underhanded, telling Todd Bowles, hey, I'm interested kind of after the fact, after he'd already met with Shad Khan in the 5 o'clock hour, that's where it went from disappointment to absolutely livid over at one Buccaneer place last night.
Yeah, and then Greg, I'm sure all of us have read the Albert Breer article, kind of detailing step-by-step process of what happened. And as Scott just alluded to, Greg, I think that's one of the big things that stood out to me is, all right, once you know that in your mind you're thinking of a change, you don't go radio silent on Thursday there and not pick up anybody's phone. And then you call Todd Bowles at 5 o'clock saying, oh, yeah, okay, I'm thinking about it. And then a little birdie from the Jacksonville front office let somebody know in Tampa, like he's already here.
Yeah.
Like, again, kind of building off of what Scott said, Greg, it's not always what you do, it's how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me like 3 days ago that Coen was taking the Jaguars job, I wouldn't have been surprised.
Right.
It made sense. Once Ben Johnson was out of the picture, a lot of people had him at the top of their list. So I think what stings is what Scott said, is that there was a moment where they had tried, you could tell reading what Albert wrote, that they kind of laid things out like very preemptively, going back to the weekend, going back to Monday. What would it take for you to stay? Asked for a number, got him that number. Okay, let's sign here. And then there's hemming and hawing for 2 days. And then again, reached an agreement to where you're patting them on the back for doing a good job of avoiding what seemed like an inevitable loss for them this offseason. And I think for them to then put it out there, hey, he's staying.
Yeah.
It gives your fans all this, excitement.
Yeah.
Wow, maybe they won't have to make a change to offensive coordinator. Legit joy. I think I talked to people that were like, wow, this is the best news of the offseason. There's no one they'll draft. There's no one they'll sign that will do more to help their chances of winning than just keeping Liam Coen. So, again, as said, the way it shook out, the way he handled it, again, I think we should try, as media, as fans, anybody, try and remember Liam Coen for what he did on the field, what he helped the Bucs do this season, and not the awkward 48 hours that ended things very badly.
Yeah, and I think that's going to take a little while, right? Because people, and partially because of what you just said, partially because there was a joy, there was a rejoice, like an exhale of, man, I thought he was leaving, now he's staying. But the way now that he's left, Scott, it leaves such a sour taste in your mouth. And then when you see this detailed account from Albert, and you go, all right, well, he wanted more money after he got the $4.5 million. They're like, all right, he went back, wanted even more money. And I also wonder, the Buccaneers said, hey, they put it in that deal of, we don't want you to take a second meeting with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Do you think that has anything to do? Well, I know obviously part of it is you want to retain the guy. You're willing to spend that money on a coordinator. But also, did they look at his track record? Did they look at a history going, man, you've been here. You've been to 8 different places in 8 years. I tweeted it out last night, guys. I don't know if you saw it. Kentucky, a guy on 3 in Kentucky wrote the article saying, Liam Coen said, I'm going to plant roots here. I'm going to be here for a couple of years. Do you think that the Buccaneers front office kind of had that in their mind, Scott? Like, we got to be careful with this guy because he's been known to jump ship.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I'll say 2 things. Number one, even if he had signed a contract to be the highest paid offensive coordinator, let's say he came in, did that first thing Thursday morning, and then still got on a plane and went to Jacksonville, met with Shad Khan. The signed contract wouldn't have meant anything because at any point in time, I mean, he was under contract as it is. All this was a contract for a raise. So he was already under contract. NFL rules state that coordinators cannot be prohibited for taking a promotion, which is a head coaching job, right? That's the same thing. You can't block somebody from taking a play calling role as a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator if you're an assistant. You can't do the same thing if you're under contract as an offensive or defensive coordinator from keeping someone from becoming a head coach. NFL rules are clear with that. So even if he had signed on the dotted line, that contract didn't mean anything. He still could have made this choice. So I just want to kind of clear that up because some people say, well, he didn't sign the contract. Even if he did, he was already under contract. This was a new contract for more money. That's it. The second thing I'll say is when you look at kind of how this whole thing transpired, there are some out there, and I understand it, and I've never advocated for Todd Bowles to be fired. I know that there is a contingent of this fan base that said, well, see, the Buccaneers should have fired Todd Bowles and just made this guy the head coach to begin with. I mean, I've heard some things, and this is not Johnny-come-lately news, and I'm not gonna divulge what I've learned, but this was during the course of the season while everybody was feeling good about Liam Coen and also getting a little worried about losing Liam Coen. There were some attributes that were on display that gave the organization some pause to not pursue that for reasons. And, this integrity matters. And say what you want about Todd Bowles. I've criticized some of his defensive doings and clock management. I've also praised him for keeping this team together. Greg, you're in that locker room with me every day. You will not find anybody on or off the record that will there's no dissension. And this has been the same way the last 2 years, even during a 4-game losing streak and 2 back-to-back seasons at 4-6 and 4-7. There was no breaking of the ranks. That locker room is lockstep. It is a culture that is together. I've never seen anything like it. In my 30 years, I've never seen a locker room as tight-knit as this one is. Todd Bowles deserves credit for that. Part of being a head coach is culture building, and Jason Light and he deserve a ton of credit for that. When you see an instance like this and how Liam Coen handled that situation, and listen, this may be just a growing pain. He might go to Jacksonville and become the next Sean McVay and learn from this and whatever, right? We don't know what the future holds. But maybe the Buccaneers dodged a bullet here because, not everybody who gets the offensive coordinator to head coach pathway becomes Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan. Sometimes it's Dirk Cutter, and it just didn't work out. Sometimes it's Mike McDaniels, and it just is not working out. So who knows what the future holds? We're not living in a Marvel multiverse where we can go down a different timeline and see, well, what would Liam Coen have done as a head coach here? He might have been better than Bowles, got this team to a Super Bowl, or he might have just kind of kept this thing as you're going to win maybe the worst division of football every year and then not really do much in the playoffs. Or he might have turned this ship aground and sank it. We just don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was actually looking because I had like a Kevin Kiermaier Iron Man thing, so I was trying to find it amongst the rubble over here. But you're right. I think that's another thing and why I had apprehension, guys, of making that move because change isn't always for the better.
Yeah.
And let's say he speaks out of both sides. Let's say Liam Coen gets the job, right?
Yeah.
And then next year he says something and it rubs Mike Evans out of all people the wrong way.
Yeah.
Now you're upsetting the apple cart and you're ruffling the feathers of a lockstep locker room that even through adversity the last couple of years has persevered, and you guys are in there every day, haven't heard a peep of dissension or discontent, which is great. Greg, do you think this harms Liam Coen going forward, or is this just one of those situations where people will look at it and go, it probably wasn't as clean, but it isn't going to affect how he builds his staff and players wanting to go play there in Jacksonville.
No, I don't think it affects those things at all. And I think, again, once he's had a product on the field, once he wins or loses, that's how he'll be known in Jacksonville. Yep, exactly. I don't think anybody discounts Bill Belichick and the number of Super Bowls he's been to because he was Jets coach for a day.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Billy Donovan, great coach, went to the Orlando Magic for a couple hours and changed his mind. So they're really, honestly, older, wiser, better coaches than Liam Coen that have had mistakes like this or missteps like this, where you're going to do one thing and you just had to do another. And again, it's one of those where that's who we think of right now. It's how we remember Liam Coen because it was yesterday.
Yeah.
But again, if at the end of this year, if they're 10-7 in Jacksonville, no one's going to be talking about, gosh, you kind of misplayed that stuff at the end with the Bucs.
Yeah.
And if they're 4-13, no one's going to worry about that. It's one of those where he'll be judged on the field. I think it's a little bit, I've forgotten this, but when Liam got the Bucs job a year ago, there was a lot, when you have a coach come into your market or your team, how they're received by the team they just left can tell you a lot. Mm-hmm. And again, Kentucky fans weren't happy with Liam Coen.
Right.
He had left them twice in 3 years.
Yep.
Again, lots of college coaches tell recruits they're not leaving, tell players they're not leaving, they leave. Liam's not alone in this boat.
Right.
There's a tweet. This is funny to see this. But there's a tweet from February 2nd of last year. Like Coen is on Twitter, but hasn't tweeted since he was a Kentucky assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And in response to his last tweet with Kentucky, which is just a normal picture of him on the sidelines, the tweet says, "Let Tampa Bay know you'll be leaving after one season. Zero loyalty to people. Your word means nothing at this point."
Wow.
Where it's like, wow, okay, that kind of hits a little close to home today. Anyway,
was that from Nostradamus?
I know, right? And again, I think it's just angry Kentucky fans that wanted him back for another year there.
Yeah.
He's a good coach. People will miss him when he's gone because they liked having him on their team.
Yeah.
But again, in this case, he's leaving a little less delicately than some people do.
I want to ask both of you guys this question. Any concern, Greg, we'll start with you and mix it up a little bit. Greg, any concern that the next offensive coordinator, I don't want to talk about the specific guys yet, any concern that Baker Mayfield is going to take a step back next year?
Well, I mean, he could. He had a really good year. I mean, when you have 41 touchdowns, 4,500 yards, he could have Coen next year and take a step back. So I don't want to set the bar for a successful season for Baker Mayfield at 41 touchdowns and 4,500 yards. I think he'll do well to lower his interceptions. I think he's, again, it's not something you want to get good at, but his entire career has been adjusting to new offenses and new coordinators every single year. He's got 7 coordinators in 7 years. So you feel bad for the guy. Bowles has kind of done the same thing with offensive coordinators as a head coach. It's not something you want to do, but it's kind of like, hey, Chris Godwin, he's been through a major rehab before. He's going to be okay going through it this time because he knows he's done it before.
Yeah. I agree. And I was going to say too, to Greg's point, I think it's exactly right. Liam Coen could still be here and Baker Mayfield could take a step back. I mean, Todd Bowles has had this relatively the same scheme, certainly using Antoine Winfield Jr. the same way. And Winfield had 4 years of really good production with that contract year being just amazing, out of this world production. And then took a massive step back this year. Granted, injuries played a role in that, but I'm just saying that's a prime example. Still in the same system with the same coaches, and yet there was a regression there. So it could have happened with Baker Mayfield and Liam Coen again. And you don't start from the same spot that you finished. Right. In football, every year at every level, from Pop Warner to the NFL, it starts with you're 0-0 tied for first place with everybody else, and you have to build your team all the way back up.
Scott, I know you guys at Pewter Report have already started compiling a list of candidates. One guy that I like is Nick Caley from the Rams. He's a guy that seems to be the favorite for the Jets job with Aaron Glenn. He's that kind of next young guy working under Sean McVay. I know you got a whole slew of guys over at pewterreport.com.
Yeah.
But who are some of the names that really stand out to you that think that could be a realistic option for the new OC?
2 guys kind of come to mind. One actually interviewed for the job last year, and he's another Sean McVay disciple, and that's Jake Peetz, who was the pass game coordinator in LA, actually replaced Liam Coen in that role when Coen went to Kentucky. And then he found a job with Seattle as the pass game coordinator there under Ryan Grubb, who got fired this offseason. But they interviewed him, and they came away with a pretty good impression of him. And again, another Sean McVay disciple, would probably have very similar styles with their background in terms of that. So he's someone that could come in. Maybe he brings his own staff. Maybe he keeps the staff intact here because of the familiarity. He coached with Kevin Carberry out in LA, for example. A name in-house that is very well thought of in the walls of One Buccaneer Place is Josh Grizzard, the pass game coordinator. He made such an impression on Miami that he was hired by Brian Flores, that when Flores left and Mike McDaniels came aboard, he kind of got demoted from receivers coach to quality control or offensive assistant. But McDaniel still thought enough of him to keep him around. And he was kind of a bit of a cherry hire when the Buccaneers brought him aboard to be the pass game coordinator, kind of like Liam Coen's right-hand man in the passing game. And he was in charge of third downs. If you look, Tampa Bay was the best team in the league with 51.1% third down conversions. And even in the playoff game, third downs weren't a problem. They converted about 55, 56%. So with Grizzard in place, he's a young, up-and-coming guy, bright guy out of Yale. He might be an in-house option if they feel that, wait a minute, we're not going to do this to Baker and Mike and Chris and Bucky and all these guys and give another system to learn, new verbiage and terminology. Let's not blow this thing up and start over. Let's keep the assistant coaches here. Remember, Cohen's probably going to be able to take one with him to be his offensive coordinator and title only. But a lot of those new assistants he brought in, they signed 2-year deals, so they're not eligible to even leave. You can't make a lateral move in the NFL from offensive line coach to offensive line coach. If I had to guess, Greg, maybe Brian Picucci, given his background with Kentucky, where he coached, and those two go back to UMass when Picucci was a coach on the UMass staff. Coen was a quarterback. That might be the guy with familiarity that comes to Jacksonville, bring some of that O-line knowledge that they'll need there to protect Trevor Lawrence and get that ground game going. So I would say Jake Peetz might be an external guy to keep in mind because of the familiarity. They've already interviewed him. And then Josh Grizzard in-house.
What about you, Greg? I know Thad Lewis is another name people are just wondering about because he, I think if he was higher up on the list, maybe he would already had the job, right? What about Thad and any other names that you're hearing or keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, like Scott said, Josh Grizzard makes a lot of sense in-house. Third down's probably about what they did best. That was the best third down season in team history, best third down team in the NFL. But again, I think one of the nice things that Liam Coen did is that he had everybody in that staff involved. So you had Grizzard working on third downs. You had Thad Lewis working on the red zone. I think it's 2-minute drill with somebody else. I'm forgetting. I'm blanking on. I think
McClendon was the 2-minute. Yeah.
So BMAC, all those guys know this offense well. And if continuity is your goal, if trying to not bring in, there might be better outside candidates you could bring in. But again, you're teaching a new language to an entire offense again. I don't think they want to do that. So I think if it's an outside hire, I think it's somebody who's probably come up in the same general offense that Liam Coen had. I think that was part of the benefit to Liam is that Baker had been in that offense only for 6-7 weeks. So like you said, Jake Peetz would make sense by that. Nick Caley would make sense like that. Nick Caley is a guy, I did a story when I was at The Athletic on John Carroll University, the school in Ohio that just produces an amazing amount of NFL coaches over the year. Nick Caley is a John Carroll guy. So I talked to him for that story. It's weird. He's on Twitter, has a private account, but he follows me. So like I've talked to Nick Caley, not necessarily about Tampa, about this job. Again, another guy who's come up in the right offense and the right system, has not been a play caller yet. It's wild to think you could roll the dice and have 3 straight offensive coaches who had never been NFL play callers and ask them to be NFL play callers and hit on all 3, but he's kind of got 2 or 3 done already. So I wonder if that gives them confidence to trust another young assistant with a similar background like that. If you're going for continuity, again, they got guys on their own staff right now where you can do that from inside. Maybe if you hire from inside your own staff, you don't have to pay quite the paycheck they were willing to pay Liam Coen. That might free up some money for you to upgrade in replacing the defensive losses they're taking right now as well. So I think there's some benefits to that as well. But more than anything, you're rolling the dice. This is a third hire in 3 years. The first 2 have worked out remarkably well, both in what they did in Tampa and what they did to leave Tampa after only 1 year. I don't say you want to take a step back. If this hire is good enough to be a head coach again, that speaks really well for the season they had in 2025.
I mean, who does that? I mean, Greg, who does that? Is that a Jason Light notch in the cap, a little feather in the cap? Is that a Todd Bowles, or is it just the entire Bucs organization, you think?
Probably both, but definitely Bowles. I mean, Bowles is
Yeah.
probably the guy that gets the last say on who his OC is. And I mean, I think it's neat in that this comes from when Bruce Arians was the head coach. Todd Bowles had a lot of autonomy on defense.
Yeah.
You're basically a head coach on defense. That weak side coordinator is such a huge thing in the NFL. And it's neat because Bruce Arians did that with Todd Bowles because he'd known him for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what's cool is that Bowles has had the same trust and the same autonomy to Dave Canales, who he did not know at all, and to Liam Coen, who he really didn't know at all. Both these guys are really late in the interview process. We talk about why do these teams go and interview 8, 9 candidates. Those guys weren't in the first round. And if people in the first round had maybe taken the job, they would have never even gotten here for an interview. So I think it's why you turn to depth and looking and uncovering every stone you can to find the right guy. It might be he's the 9th guy you interview, but he might be the guy that you connect with the most, and it might work out really well. So like I said, I think this is something where they've had good success with it twice. Yeah. That definitely speaks well to Todd Bowles. Anyone that said, the offense is all Cohen's only here because Todd Bowles saw something and trusted him in a way nobody else in the NFL did.
Yeah.
And I think that's worth something.
I think you're spot on, Greg. And really to that point, Jay, when you look at how this offensive coordinator role has been perceived, Todd Bowles couldn't bribe anybody to take the job in 2023 because he had just won the NFC South Championship with Tom Brady with an 8-9 record and then a loss in the division, right? And then Brady retires. The only quarterback on the staff was Kyle Trask. Nobody wanted the job. They had to basically offer it to Dave Canales, who had zero play calling experience at any level except for high school or junior college way back in the day. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing how it's gone from that where like nobody wanted it. Like Todd Monken, they wanted to hire him. He turned him down. And part of that was because the feeling around the league was that Bowles was on thin ice, right? He was the kind of the last minute replacement for Bruce Arians. March 22nd when he took the job. They didn't even have an interview process with anybody else. They anointed him as the successor. And it wasn't an attractive job. Fast forward 2 years now, Todd Bowles is a kingmaker. Mm-hmm. I mean, the sales pitch, I would say to any offensive coordinator candidate, hey, come to Tampa, coach with me for a year. I'll make you head coach. I mean, that's an attractive offer, right? Not the Buccaneer fans or Todd Bowles wants that to happen, but that's what's happened. So he's a bit of a kingmaker. Oh, and by the way, you come here, you're getting the best version of Baker Mayfield. Mike Evans, still a 1,000-yard receiver. We're going to re-sign Chris Godwin, the youngest and best offensive line. We got a 1,000-yard rookie running back. There's a lot to like about this job. It has gone from being nobody really wants a job to just the span of 2 years. I think the Buccaneers will have their pick of the lot. They will be able to really hone in on this, and I think Todd Bowles' email bin is full right about now with candidates sending their resumes in.
John Gruden's not sending his resume in. He doesn't have to send a resume in, does he?
I don't think Gruden's in play.
He probably has a file in the office.
He's got a file open there. It's funny how for certain teams, like one name always comes through every hiring cycle, and Gruden is one of those guys. Yeah. Before I let you guys go, I want to talk about the defensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. Scott, I know we've already Larry Foote, Casey Rogers on the way out. Yeah. Talk to us about what you think about these moves, if there's going to be more guys that are going to be leaving on the defensive staff, because you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago and we said that there were changes that need to be made. I think there was a surprise that it was these two guys before anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, these are with also Rashad Johnson, the nickelbacks coach, thrown into the mix. These are the best coaches on the staff, in my opinion. And I think you look at the fact that the Tampa Bay had less than 20 takeaways as a team for the first and only time that Todd Bowles has been a coach here, going back to 2019. And at some point in time, and this just happens, the message gets lost a little bit. Like the message gets stale. And I remember when Monty Kiffin lost Herm Edwards to the Jets to be the head coaching job there. He was the Bucs defensive backs coach, Tony Dungy's assistant head coach. And then Lovie Smith was the linebackers coach, and he got tabbed by Mike Martz to become the defensive coordinator for the St. Louis Rams. Kiffin could have easily hired some of his peers, right? Another old grizzled veteran like Rod Marinelli, who kept on as his defensive line coach. Instead, he went younger, more energetic, brought some guys with enthusiasm and new ideas, tabbed Mike Tomlin from University of Cincinnati Bearcats, defensive backs coach. Joe Barry had coaching stops in Northern Arizona, UNLV, USC, and then 1 year as a quality control guy with the 49ers. And he brings these two young guys into the mix in 2001. And lo and behold, 1 year later in 2002, they're winning a Super Bowl. The Bucs interceptions had gone from 25, which, boy, Todd Bowles would love to have that number, right? 25 in 2000, and then 28 interceptions in 2001 to a franchise record 31 interceptions during the Super Bowl year, not including the playoffs. This is the regular season. And so I just remember Kiffin and Marinelli, that experience with some young blood, some fresh ideas from different ranks, not just old cronies around the league. And it made a big difference. And I think there's some coaches on the staff, outside linebackers, cornerbacks, secondary, that I think those areas underperformed. That if you're looking at Todd Bowles, can you honestly look in the mirror and say, I've got the best outside linebackers coach, the best cornerbacks coach, and the best safeties coach in the league? And if the answer is yes, then who are you kidding? If the answer is no, which we all know that it is, you better go out and try to find some upgrades, because you do that every year on your roster, and you need to do it on your coaching staff. One little point here I'll make. Look at what this offensive staff has done in 1 year. And these are, by and large, younger coaches, guys in their early 40s, late 30s, okay? Never coached in Tampa before outside of Skip Peete, who did a remarkable job as a holdover. Thad Lewis, the quarterback's coach. But 2 new offensive line coaches, that position leveled up. New receivers coach, that position leveled up. New tight ends coach, that position leveled up. So sometimes new, younger, more energy, different ideas can kind of challenge the status quo, shake things up, make things better. And I think we saw that on the offensive side of the ball. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, very much the same. I mean, again, you guys know this. Todd Bowles is a fiercely loyal coach.
Yeah, he is.
And he's going to stick with his guys and trust his guys because he knows them and he's worked with them. And I think it's important to say, I don't think he wants to put anybody on the street just out of a job.
Yeah.
But if, again, like he and Casey Rogers have been together 17 years, 4 different teams, all right, as close 2 coaches are going to be. But if you're Casey Rogers, again, like how many times has Casey Rogers called an NFL defense? Because he's been with Todd Bowles, and Todd Bowles calls the defense.
Yeah.
So for him, as much as he likes what he has here, likes the people he has here, likes coaching for Todd Bowles, if he has a chance to go to a really good defensive line, okay, in Detroit, one of the best in the league, even with their losses from a personnel standpoint, will be a team to beat in the NFC next year. Probably got a raise, has a chance for advancement there. I don't fault him. And for Bowles, again, we said at the end of the season, we thought there'd be change on defense, okay, and probably didn't think it was necessarily Casey Rogers right away, but I think it does him well to bring in new faces and new input and fresh voices in that room. Guys that'll challenge him, guys will say, hey, when we were here, we did this. This is something that could work here.
Right.
Instead of guys that know your system and know exactly how to communicate it and exactly how to coach it. Bowles is going to have to probably do more coaching this year in terms of getting his assistants to know what he wants, to be able to pass that along to players. But that might be a good thing. Like Scott just said, I think to look on offense and see the overhaul they had there, guys that Bowles didn't necessarily know, guys that, again, you look at Kevin Carberry, the respect we have for Kevin Carberry is an assistant offensive line coach with the Saints a year ago.
Yeah. And
they found him, they identified him, had ties to, obviously had worked with Liam, but I think they're going to do a lot to try and keep Kevin Carberry here. I think Kikuchi, like you said, has some long-standing ties with Coen. He'd probably go. But I think I could easily see them giving Carberry a run game coordinator or something like that to help make sure he stays here because they love what he did with the offensive line.
Yeah.
So all of these offensive upgrades we can point to as being a function of Coen, but the people around him have helped too. So the more that they can keep the rest of this staff back and intact, personnel-wise, player-wise, they're going to be almost the same offense next year. Yeah. The only free agents are Godwin, who missed 10 weeks anyway, and Ben Bredeson, who they could probably bring back if they wanted to. So you can have this offense, in terms of how it looks on the field, look almost as close as you want to 24 next year. It's just trying to find somebody now, inside or outside, that can yield the same kind of results and the same kind of success with the same parts in a much better position than Coen was a year ago taking over this job.
Man, this has been great conversation back and forth. Greg, let us know what you got going on for Fox Sports and where everybody can find you, brother.
Yeah, just getting ready for the games this weekend. Excited to go to Mobile next week, go to New Orleans a couple days after that. So busy couple weeks ahead. This is kind of the best time of the year to be an NFL writer. So excited to be doing those things. And all the meanwhile, it's going to be tracking down offensive coordinator searches and defensive assistant coaches and all those kind of things. But again, it's a fun time to be a writer.
Scott, how about you and everything going on at pewterreport.com?
Yep, we'll be shoulder to shoulder with Greg and Mobile at the Senior Bowl with the Pewter Report staff next week. We'll have live podcasts at nighttime during the Mobile week for us there. We'll be checking out the Buccaneers do an awful lot of digging. Even though Jason Light and Todd Bowles won't be there, they'll be in front of their laptops doing Zoom interviews with offensive coordinator candidates. They haven't been to Mobile in like 2 or 3 years now because they've always had to find coordinators during this time of year, but we'll be there. And the Buccaneers have drafted guys like Tyke Smith last year. Graham Barton was supposed to be there. He pulled out with an injury. Yaya Diaby, Payne Durham, Servassier Dennis. There's a lot of guys that the Buccaneers draft from the Senior Bowl. So we'll be there covering that all week. You can find us on YouTube at Pewter Report TV. It's our YouTube channel where we do those podcasts. Then on X, Facebook, and Instagram at Pewter Report and pewterreport.com, the mothership, where we've got all these stories, including the one about the possible offensive coordinator candidates up there right now.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you so much, man. This is the highest viewership that we've had. 3 weeks. This is the final 3 weeks of the Jay Recher podcast. You guys have always been so supportive throughout my journey over covering all the teams here in the Tampa Bay area over the last decade. And the numbers today are just through the roof, and
That's
partially
awesome,
because
Jay.
of Liam Coen, but more importantly, because of you two heavy hitters, man, the 3 and 4 hitters that I got on the program today. So thank you guys so much for the support, your time. Have a great weekend. And we'll all be up till 2, 3 in the morning because, of course, these stories never end. Scott, Greg, thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Guys.
All right.